Hello, and welcome to thatTApodcast, a podcast brought to you by the talent acquisition team here at That Game Company, where we take you behind the scenes to highlight the amazing talent here at TGC. You'll be hearing from myself, Luke Davis, and my colleagues in the TA team, Christine Chua and Mark Bradbury, throughout these episodes as we interview staff from various departments and disciplines. We'll be posting new episodes every month to our TGC YouTube channel. With that, let's get to this month's guest. Thank you for listening to That TA Podcast. We're very excited to be back with you with yet another special guest, this time from the art department. Nancy, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, share your title with us, and then tell us a little bit about how you ended up here at TGC.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nancy Tsang, and I'm a lead 3D character artist at TGC. I've been at TGC for about 2.5 years working on our unannounced project. I'm also managing character artists across both Sky and the new project. So this might be a slightly long-winded answer, but before I worked for TGC, I worked at a 3D animation company for about 14 years. And a few years into that, Genova was actually invited to give a talk about how TGC made Journey and how they had designed the levels based on the emotional arcs of the hero's journey. And he also described his vision for the types of games that TGC was committed to making. And I just remember that talk being so inspiring that afterwards I actually looked up like what it would be like to work at TGC, and then I saw I'd have to move to LA, so that dream kind of fizzled out there. But I was always, really impressed by the artistry and elegance of Journey, and I think that was kind of the first time that I realized that games could be more than just a game. They could be these interactive, emotional experiences and tell a story. So around that time, my then partner, now husband, and I started playing around with Unity after work. And, being in animation, we were interested in using a game engine to speed up the rendering and iteration process. That typically slows down animation filmmaking. So we experimented a lot with creating little story vignettes and playing stylized looks in Unity. Since then, I've dabbled a little bit in VR and worked on a couple of indie games, and all these projects were just kind of like side hobbies. Anyways, I realized that I had kind of grown out of animation during this time, and I started to look for opportunities to move into the games industry. So TGC was on a very short list of game studios that I wanted to work for, and it just so happened that they had a remote character artist opening. And honestly, at first, I almost didn't apply because I just assumed that it had already been filled. But fortunately, I heard from a friend at work that we had a common colleague who actually worked at TGC, so I reached out to him, and he helped me get an interview, and then, several more interviews and an art test later, here I am.
That's awesome. I love that example too of you never know what's in the pipeline. Always apply. Like never get yourself out of the process. Like put yourself out there. I love that. Just to ask you, did you initially start kind of wanting to go more the animation route, or was the dream always kind of on the game side?
When I went to school, I was just interested in anything related to film, VFX, 3D. Entertainment really was kind of just like the broad bucket that I was interested in. And I think at the time, games seemed like it was more for people who like to work on, shooting type of games. And the 3D assets back then were, lower fidelity, and, the engines were not, supporting the type of 3D work that I was interested in. But seeing Journey really changed my mind, because I was like, oh, you can make a really beautiful stylized game and make it really impactful. So that was really a turning point for me.
That's awesome. I love being able to see. I think there's always an interesting aspect of people that work in the gaming industry, with those that have had that one goal for forever. And then I think, especially as we see more and more overlap with, you mentioned animation, you mentioned even in the entertainment industry, using things like game engines to power some of the Star Wars Disney rides or things like that. Like there's that kind of overlap between TV animation and games, I think, in a way that hasn't been there before. Did you find it difficult to transition to more gaming specific assets, or was it a pretty easy transition with all the things that are kind of overlapping in those industries nowadays?
At least for my transition to TGC, I didn't find it too difficult because I feel like the approach that we use to, model assets for animation and how we model assets for a TGC are pretty similar. Um, yeah, I wasn't yeah, too bothered by it.
As far as, obviously you've had a very impressive, career before TGC, but when thinking about some of the work you've done recently with TGC, has there been a favorite thing that you've worked on or a favorite type of project that you're like, hey, this is the element of the job that I would really love to spend all my time doing if possible? Anything like that when you think about your role here?
So when I joined TGC, I really wanted to kind of get the experience of working on a game from beginning to end. And so on the current project that I'm working on, we're still in pre-production, and so I'm really getting that. I'm in the middle of like, helping to figure out what the pipelines are going to be for characters, what the look is going to be, um, and it's just really fun and messy and exciting to work on. So I feel really fortunate to be in this role and getting to see how TGC makes games. Um, so yeah, I guess I don't know. I love everything that I'm doing right now, even if it, can get messy sometimes.
I love that too, and I think that's one thing that I think when you think about artists and creatives, the idea, the stereotype perhaps of like, oh, all I'm doing is drawing cool figures and making cool models, and that's really all I'm doing for my job. And it's like, well, that's part of it. And then, like you mentioned, there's the pipeline, there's communication with other departments, there's figuring out, the 2D to 3D pipeline. There's a lot more, I think, planning and the almost the organization of creativity has always been something that's kind of fascinated me. Especially when I talk to newcomers or students that are kind of in the weeds trying to just learn, Maya, ZBrush, whatever it is. It's like, hey, that's a part of the job, but then there's also all these other pieces to think about as an artist and as an artist working with other people. Do you have kind of any advice for newcomers that are looking at 3D art, especially nowadays? The advice that you'd give, whether it's on the technical like discipline, like here's how to best make a model, or more advice around kind of some of the organizational or discipline pieces that you give out to newcomers?
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you brought that up because, maybe I'll just start by kind of describing what a 3D character artist does and like what my typical day is, and then I can talk about some advice. So a 3D character artist will generally work on all aspects of the character, and that can include modeling, texturing, and hair grooming. We work on humans, animals, cosmetics, and props that the characters interact with. And because I'm on a project that is still in pre-production, a typical day for me usually first involves, thinking about what my top priorities are. So that could include making assets that help define the look of our game. So making pretty models with beautiful textures. Or that could involve creating blockout assets for design and engineering to test an idea with. I could be testing pipeline tools. I could be collaborating with other departments to solve some kind of artistic or technical challenge. And then as a lead, I'm also checking in with members of my team, offering mentorship, participating in Sky's art reviews, and even helping them out with their assets if they need extra help. Um, for artists on Sky, they're typically adhering to a more traditional production pipeline. So, getting handoffs from concept artists and then collaborating with them to make the best version of that concept in 3D. So, my advice for newcomers for a 3D discipline is to not skip learning the foundational art skills. Take all the drawing, sculpting, and painting classes you can. Immerse yourself in art that you like. Growing your eye for appeal, growing your aesthetic taste are really, really important, especially now that AI is making it look like anyone can make art. In terms of 3D, I also think it's an important skill to have. An important skill to have is knowing how topological flow affects your character deformations. Yeah, knowing that your work is going to be used by other departments, and so making sure that you're aware of how they work and their needs is really important. Um, and getting an internship, getting your foot in the door somewhere is good because it starts to build your job network. But if you can't get an internship, come up with your own projects, and this will force you to be curious and to learn new skills and techniques. And showing that you have a variety of skills in your portfolio will really set you apart, in my opinion.
That's such good advice, and I love the idea of coming up with your own projects. Obviously, working in the internship field, if I had my way, there would be thousands of internship positions everywhere, right? But there's not, especially in gaming. It's quite a small number when you look globally, but that doesn't mean you can't do the work. I think thinking about like a portfolio, a website of something that is your work as a student, whether or not you're in school, whether or not you're in a like a traditional program, but coming up with your own projects. And one thing that I heard from an artist once was the idea of putting in your portfolio the pieces that people can see in their games. So rather than, I find when I look at a lot of early career people that are transitioning into artists, art as a discipline, their portfolios are often kind of all over the place. It's a little bit of 2D, it's a little bit of concept art, it's a little bit of 3D assets. And I think there's some way of seeing kind of like you said that variety of skills, but sometimes when you look at a portfolio, it's hard to tell like, hey, what is this person actually focused on, or what are the things they're really passionate about doing? Do you have advice for kind of building a portfolio? What to put in, how to think about those pieces in there when you kind of look at getting into the art side specifically?
Um, what I've learned, from others, or the advice that I've been given from others about building a portfolio is to always have your best work first. Um, I think you should put not only your best work, but also the work that you're most interested in first, and then you can kind of add supplemental material that shows like, hey, I'm also really good at drawing, or like I'm also really good at painting, or I'm also really good at writing tools. Um, I think that'll make it clear for recruiters and people evaluating your work that yes, you really do want to apply for this particular position, but also, hey, if you know you are able to speak these other languages.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned writing tools from your perspective as someone that's been doing this in some very cool places before. Are you finding when you think about tool writing or any type of technical art positions, are you finding it more and more beneficial for perhaps those, and particularly like the early to mid kind of seniority level, to have a little bit of the technical side to be able to do maybe some tool writing or work more on the back end side of some of these art things rather than just having the like I am good at this art or this art style or making this piece, but having some more of the technical side is helpful? Or do you think it still kind of depends on the position?
I think it depends on the position. For 3D art, that's definitely not a requirement. It's I think if we see that you can do that, it's a plus. That to show that you're not afraid of code or like debugging something that might be broken. It also shows like some uh, a self drive to um, want to learn these aspects of the pipeline. But I think certainly for like entry level position, I wouldn't say that's like a deal breaker.
You mentioned earlier as part of your role as lead is actually managing and mentoring other artists. Can you talk about what that looks like? How when especially I think for that early to mid seniority again, what does it look like to be mentored? What are things that they can look out for and as they grow? And kind of what's the balance of are you mainly doing like hard skills of art, like hey, here's how to better use this thing in ZBrush, or is it more about eye and appeal in general, or does it really depend on the person?
It does kind of depend on what seniority level they're currently at. So there are some people on my team who, I'm working with them on like how to set deadlines and how to set a schedule for themselves. And then there are others who I'm, working with to figure out how to make their art more appealing, how to grow their eye, like you're saying. Um, Most of the time, people have the skills, they have the hard skills already. So it's really kind of growing the muscle of like being able to see something and then looking at your work, your own work, and then taking a step back and saying, what else needs to happen to my asset to make it look better, to take it to the next level? How can I get the essence of the concept art that's being given to me and really translate that in the way that is in the sky, the style of Sky, or the style of the new project?
When you look at a video game and how much work and how many different people and how many different disciplines it takes to make, it just doesn't make sense on a fundamental level. Is one of my hot takes that I really don't think it makes sense. But the science and creativity, and I think one thing to think about is like how the hard skills and having those hard skills be a part of your experience, but then being able, like you said, to go that maybe like extra 5% at the end that just pushes it to that next level, I think is a great way to phrase it for sure. As far as your own work, I'm always fascinated by the types of people here at TGC, and here at TGC, I think because of our size, there's a lot of cool opportunities for folks to maybe do something that's kind of ongoing learning, or trying something maybe a little bit outside of their comfort zone. Is there something cool in your kind of on your day to day, or something in your discipline that you learned or did recently that stuck out, especially as something cool or something new that you had fresh?
In a way, all of this is pretty new to me.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the hard skills are fine. I feel like I'm at a point where I can translate things pretty well into 3D. But TGC is a much more collaborative space than the role that I was at in my previous job. I'm having to work more closely with engineering, tech art, biz dev, and people are also looking to me to make decisions on what direction certain like the characters are going to go in. So I think that aspect has been new and very cool. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoy working here. Um, and yeah, I think that it's not just because I'm a lead. I think that people at all levels at TGC kind of have a version of this, or can participate in a version of this.
Yeah, I love that. Again, I think I've said this almost every episode, but wearing lots of hats, I think, is a phrase I've heard often from TGC folks. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Another thing, a goal of the podcast is highlighting some of the kind of core values that we have here at TGC. And one of the values, especially, is called grow together, the idea that we're always growing, always learning something new. As we've kind of seen that value in your past couple of years at TGC, have you seen that value play out in any specific ways, or any cool stories about something that was kind of viewed at from that lens?
I really love that this is a core value, because it not only encourages ongoing learning, but it also acts as a way to strengthen our teams. The art team itself kind of consists of 3D, biz dev, audio, animation, effects, and tech art. And we have bi-weekly art grow-togethers where various people on the team will just volunteer to teach something over lunch. So we've had topics like plein air painting, or showing off a cool VR sculpting tool, or how to make tiling textures in Substance Designer. And it's been a really great way to just learn about the different disciplines within art, and how people view their work, and what people do on the side, and how people stay inspired, has been really great.
I love those, and I'm glad you mentioned this, because as someone who's always dabbled a little bit in digital painting and art like that, I'm very excited to have those and watch some of the ones that you shared out with the broader company. So thank you for helping my ADHD find a new topic to obsess over. Thinking through kind of in general, obviously one of the things at TGC, we're all remote. We're coming to each other from all over different places. We obviously have an LA office that we do some things out of, but when you think about more kind of the social experiences or experiences with your team overall at TGC that maybe not be as technical, do you have kind of a favorite experience at TGC so far?
Yeah, I think my favorite experience has probably been one of our team on-sites from last year. And it was an on-site where, like, the first part was kind of working together with kind of our core game team, to get a build of our game working for the rest of the company to play. And then the following week was like the full company on site. And I felt like I had finally been at the company long enough to have at least spoken to most people on the teams that I work with. So when we gathered in person, it just felt like meeting an old friend that I hadn't seen in a long time. That was really cool. We just, it was like we just kind of clicked immediately. And then working together in person was also such a different experience. It felt like college and cramming for a final project or something. Um, and then after that was the full company on site, and that was more of like team building, doing fun stuff, and also seeing people on the Sky team that we don't normally get to see or talk to. So that was also really nice.
I'll definitely say, as an introvert, who I know is on the talent acquisition team, funnily enough, I feel like most of the talent acquisition folks I talk to are introverted. But I will say I really love being able to do both the remote and the on-site. I feel like it's a great benefit of like have the benefits of remote, but then actually get to see people in person every now and then and have that like summer camp high that carries you for the next little bit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as some of the other things we're trying to highlight in terms of, TGC culture is what we kind of do in our Slack channel. Are there any fun Slack channels that are kind of been a highlight for you?
Definitely the pets channel. I love seeing everybody's fur balls, lizards, birds. Yeah, they're all very cute.
I'm glad you highlighted that it's not just dogs and cats. People might be surprised by the diversity of species that is in our pets channel.
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
very amazing. Yeah.
We will make you go on air to say whether or you're a dog or cat person. We won't. We'll keep that off air to make sure there's no, feathers ruffled, so to speak, to do a bad pun.
Yeah, I have two cats myself.
Okay, two cats. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that's that we are kind of trying to keep tabs as we continue to grow TGC. Whether we're growing into more of a cat or dog company. So the next on-site, maybe we'll have some updates on that. When you think about, life at TGC, and part of the goal of the podcast is highlighting, the types of people that are working here. Are there specific traits that you've seen at your coworkers that stand out, or if you're encouraging someone, talking to someone else, what type of person would you encourage to apply to our roles here? Anything like that when you think about, what's predicted success for some of your teammates here at TGC?
Yeah, I think any person who is curious about um, a lot of things, who's self-driven, who's kind of uh, able to communicate well, collaborate well, and most of all, who's really passionate about building positive experiences in gaming.
Nancy, one thing I from talking to a lot of creatives and coming from a creative family, I think there's always a question I have about where people find inspiration. Do you find that as an artist, that when you close your laptop at the end of the day and you look to do creativity in your own life, in your personal life, are you looking other places for inspiration? I've talked to some artists that they go on walks and they sketch wildlife just to get and then flowers just to give something else that's outside of kind of the digital screen. Um, and I've talked to some of my friends that are like, nope, I'm basically just always doing cool characters in game art like 100% of the time. Sometimes I get paid for it, and sometimes I just do it for fun. So, do you have any kind of when you think about inspiration and creativity, any things like that, where when you rituals or habits for yourself as a personal meditation almost?
That's a great question because I am constantly looking for ways to get inspired. I have a 4-year-old, and so he definitely takes up a lot of my focus and energy after work. But lately, I've been trying to find inspiration through him. Like he's constantly drawing things and coming up with stories, and he like I'm just inspired seeing him go for it. He's not like bothered by like, oh, is this going to be good or not? He's just like, this is what's in my head, and I'm just going to put it down. Um, and yeah, in other places, I try to garden. I try to get outside, look at nature, find beauty in lighting, natural lighting. I also turn back towards screens to get inspiration. I'm, definitely consume TV shows, movies, whatever people are recommending to me that are great stories to watch. I'm definitely looking at those for inspiration. Um, but yeah, going back to my son, we're starting to help him learn Chinese, and um, I started thinking about another project that what are some side projects that I could have, and um, I decided that I would try to make a little Chinese learning game for him. And so lately I've been kind of tinkering with making just like a flashcard game that would appeal to a 4-year-old and get him to like learn Chinese without him realizing that he's learning Chinese.
I mean, when you think about game design and playtesting, what the 4-year-old audience might be one of the most difficult, but also, inspirational audiences to design for. So, as far as one of the other things I love about TGC is how many unique and creative hobbies is represented across the company. Do you have any, speaking of kind of cool hobbies, besides, designing a game for your 4-year-old about Chinese language learning? Do you have any other kind of hobby highlights or pastimes that people might be surprised about?
Um, yeah, I think I mentioned I do enjoy gardening, and I've been trying to get back into it. And this year I grew like a great crop of beets and snap peas, and it was really satisfying to be able to cook them for dinner. Um, but yeah, like I guess I'm still making games on the side. So besides that learning game, I've also been trying to finish up another arcadey cooperative game that I had started when I was pregnant. And my goal for that game had been to play it with my child someday. He's now 4. So I'm trying to finish that up. But yeah, those are kind of my hobbies. I'm definitely looking for new hobbies, trying to transition away from games now that I'm working in games. So if you have any ideas, I would love to hear them.
Oh, that's awesome. No, and I love the idea too. I think once you work in games, it's an interesting, yeah, when you're day to day and you're 40 hours a week is on games. I think having something that's either physical, like you're not the first person I've talked to that's been like gardening or something with their hands, and something that's really like tactile, I think is an interesting approach. So we'll keep on doing these episodes and we'll keep on asking other people's their hobbies so we can hopefully find you something. All right. Well, I think that gets us good on time for these questions for today. Nancy, thank you so much for being with us. And for future episodes, keep an eye on the TGC YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today on today's episode of That TA Podcast. You can follow That Game Company on LinkedIn and Instagram to keep up to date on company news and future podcast episodes. As a reminder, all of our open rules will be posted at thatgamecompany.com/careers. Keep your light shining bright, and we'll see you next time.